If you call this milk, do you call this a pillow? Milk, pillow.
Hey, it's the Geekbus here, and yes, I'll confess, somehow this thing came across my For You, and here's old Brian straightening us out on the pronunciation of milk. What it reminded me of is all the way back in the third grade, a new kid showed up, and I liked him, and he became a friend of mine. He was a fun guy, but he did pronounce milk, milk. And it used to drive me insane even then, and I've never forgotten it in my entire life, and it still drives me insane. So I'm thinking to myself, what do I care? Why why does this matter at all? And of course, I grant myself various completely meaningless or seemingly meaningless pet peeves. That's fine by me to have those. I'll allow myself that. And I figure it's not as though I go around correcting anybody's pronunciation of anything, nor do I let it bother me for more than that instant when it grates my last nerve. And this is one of them. What's happening there? I wonder to myself. Something. So I am forced to ask myself, well, what do I care how anybody pronounces anything? I don't know. Once upon a time, William Safire wrote a book called In Love with Norma Loquendi. The idea being that our language evolves and is determined by its usage. I'm no language expert or linguistics expert, but that sounds true to me, and I know that words take on new meanings through the generations. I have a lot of pet peeves about that too, although they really make me look like an old get off my lawn shouting at clouds guy if I get going on that. So I attempt not to, and to embrace various new usages. But these little pronunciation quirks, I don't know. In fact, the pronunciations that come with various dialects and subcultures, those don't bother me at all. I don't know what it is. I know that they're a thing. As long as the way you pronounce something is a thing, it will never bother me. I don't think. That's what I claim. I go on record as saying they won't bother me. But these individual quirky pronunciations, and sometimes I realize, like people from Philadelphia have a way of pronouncing their O's, and I noticed this with one person once that it drove me crazy, and then I realized it's everybody, and then it didn't bother me anymore. So that's a weird phenomenon. That has something to do with something. And milk, I'm sure, is like that too. I'm sure it's a regional thing. I haven't bothered to look into it, to be honest. But this one kid was like that for me in the third grade, and it's stuck with me ever since. Candidly, I never even think about it. I'm sure even if I hear it. But this particular TikTok pushed that button for me. I said, yes, this guy, he's right. He's right. He's onto something here. And I thought, why do I care about that? Which, of course, in reality, I don't. But I did ask myself, well, what is it? And why, if it's just a quirky thing, a one off, why does that bother me so much? I have a friend who I think to this day, a good number of decades into life, pronounces the word tomorrow, tomorrow, like the mushroom, tomorrow. And that too drives me insane. Now, there I think I can point to what the problem is. I feel it's a situational awareness problem. How many times do you have to hear a word before you figure out that maybe you're not pronouncing it the way everyone else is? And there's something about the failure of situational awareness there that drives me nuts. Now, you might ask, well, why would that drive you nuts? What do you care about somebody else's way of pronouncing anything? I was talking in a recent video about projection, the defense mechanism of projection, thinking that guy is a regular in this bar. How do you know that? There's only one way. You gotta be a regular in there yourself. And so that's one of the hallmarks of projection. It takes one to know one. In this case, I'm thinking, well, why is it important that somebody have situational awareness? Or why does it bother me so much when I feel that they don't? Well, that's got to point to something about my own situational awareness. I'm sure of that, although I'm not quite sure what. And I, of course, am procrastinating, bothering to think about it. But the same thing is true with some of these pronunciations. So I guess I feel that if somebody doesn't pronounce something the way I pronounce it, the way I think it should be pronounced, then they are declaring themselves alien to me in some way. They are parting company with me in some way. And I think maybe that's what it is that bugs me about some of these things. Not that it should, but it does. And of course, it doesn't bother me for more than a split instant, and I don't think about it. It's not a federal case, but I just notice it. It's kind of funny that way. So I can think of a million of these, but the milk thing is particularly stupid on my part because really, as I said, what do I care? However, it was kind of fun to find this guy's video because I'm thinking, yeah, now we're talking. This serious business, this milk thing, who goes around saying that? And even though I know plenty of people do, and it's a free country, you know. but I wondered, what about that? Now, one of the, I don't know if it's a gift or a curse that my mind seems to have bestowed upon me is any time that I am sure I'm right about something, or I have an attitude about something, like, I know how you need to pronounce something. It certainly isn't milk. Once I get an idea like that, I automatically ask myself, are there things like that in myself? Like, where do I get off being judgmental about how people pronounce words when I'm certain there are plenty of those myself? I'll give you an example of one. When I was a kid, I pronounced the word careful as careful. I believe that's because my mother, whose name was Carol, also, nothing narcissistic about it, but pronounced the word careful, careful, like Carol. And so that's the way I pronounced it for, I would say, well into the 6th or 7th grade, maybe. And some kid pointed it out to me. You say careful. And I'm like, oh yeah. Ooh, I don't like that. I don't like that for a couple of reasons. Because it's kind of wrong, and worse, it's kind of too mommy. Like I go around pronouncing things the way mommy did, and that we can't have that. A young man can't be going around clinging to mom's apron strings, I think is what it felt like to me. I'm not saying there's anything virtuous about any of that. There's anything good or bad about it. I'm not saying that it's a terrible thing to love your mommy, by no means. But many of us young men would rather die than be perceived to be clinging to mommy in some way. So I corrected that one back then in the 7th grade or whenever it was. And I'm careful about how I pronounce that word to this day. But my mind was not willing to let me off the hook that easily. So the other day, somebody said to me, this person pronounced always the way you do. And I said, well, how do I pronounce it? And they go, always. You say always. And I thought, yeah, I do say always. I always say always. And then I realized, well, that's not the right way to pronounce it. It's always. And when I'm emphasizing it, I always do, then I say always. But the rest of the time it's always. And I never gave it a thought. And I never heard that everyone else in the world pronounced it differently. There's one that I hate in the other direction. That's often. I hate that. And I think I hate it because I think it's a hypercorrection. That often is, I think, the preferred pronunciation of that word. And often I feel it's when you say, he gave a ride to my friend John and I. That use of I sounds better than the objective me. It sounds more educated. And there's a million of these, I'm sure everyone knows about it, but I take it the same way. So I already feel somebody's trying to be smarter than they are, better than they are by saying often, well, I'm going to pronounce it the right way, often. So that's an example of how completely petty I am capable of being. But there I am with always. And it's terrible. I was shocked, at this phase of life, and I've still got something that I am just plain pronouncing the wrong way. As far as I know, there may be no one who pronounces it always, except me, and so I am going to be attempting to correct that for I don't know what reason, but just because I am. And I am certain that there are lots of people who say, you say it the way you want. Forget, who cares what anybody else thinks and all that sort of thing. And these are good questions. So one might ask, what is the point of this whole digression? Why talk about this? And I think it has to do with what we now refer to. It's related to projection that I was talking about before, but now we refer to this as othering. And that is, someone is not the same as I am, and I don't like them because of that. And this is, I think we would all agree, not a particularly healthy or desirable trait. And it's one thing if you're othering that terrible group of people who go around saying milk, or often, but it gets serious when you start to other people on every other kind, by the way they look, or a group of people they belong to, or a way of thinking, a bigger way of speaking, whatever it is. This is a way of putting people into a category and then excluding them. And I think we can allow ourselves our petty otherings, but the reason that I focus on these things for myself is it's much easier to recognize the othering in these small instances than it often is in the bigger instances. I remember I gave a talk one time about how computers were going to be good psychoanalysts, that there's a quantitative quality to psychoanalysis that computers are going to be particularly good at. There are many other dimensions to it as well, but I told the audience this particular thing, the computers are coming for your jobs, is roughly what I was saying. But that wasn't really my point. What I found was the look of horror on the faces of people, and very quickly they're saying, computers will never be able to do what a human can do, and a computer will never have feelings or understand anything like a human can. And it had that quality of defensiveness to it. And I said, the reason I'm telling you this is not that I know whether computers are going to be taking over or going to be better psychoanalysts or anything else, although I think there are many ways in which that's true. I would almost hope that it's true in the sense that means that psychoanalysis is something understandable. If the machine can figure it out, then that means it's something more than just some kind of woo quackery. So I do think that's good in a sense. But I said the point here is not that. The point here is that feeling that you noticed when I told you the computers are coming for what you do, that feeling of fear and hatred, and the idea that the computers could never be like us, they could never do what we do, that, whether it's true or not, is immaterial. The point is that feeling you had is othering. It's a scrambling to find ways in which the computers will never be what we are. It's scrambling to exclude them from ourselves. There is an entire history of this in the human being in our efforts to differentiate ourselves from the animals. God knows when this all started, but it seems certainly for hundreds of years, and probably a lot longer than that, human beings have made it a point to A, appoint ourselves boss of the animals, and B, to say that we're at a different level. In fact, we say we're not animals at all. Animals are animal, and we are special. We have reason, we have ethics, we have, I don't know what all we have, but somehow it makes us different from and better than the animals, which seems unlikely to me. And where do we get off doing that? Well, all of that is othering. You can see it in the computer analogy of nothing else, or the Melk version. And again, the reason I think that's so important is if you can see it in the infinitesimal, in the deep infrared, then you can see it in the bigger picture and in the ultraviolet. And by that, I mean, if you can see that in yourself in micro instances, you can also see it in yourself in macro instances, like when you are excluding groups of people, when you're making judgments based on the feelings of hatred I have about somebody who says milk. Is it's patently absurd, but it doesn't feel so absurd when people are hating at bigger levels than that, even though it's based on the same kind of fear of being at one with your fellow humans and the animals and planet Earth. There's no reason I can think of not to attempt to embrace the entire planet as a single entity of which we are small constituents. No reason not to look at it that way and have to place ourselves above or in charge of everything and everyone else. So I'm embarrassed by how quickly I took to the milk thing. And of course, to give our friend Brian on the TikTok the credit he deserves, this is humor on his part. He's not making this so that we can all band together and hunt down the people who say milk. He's illustrating for us the absurdity of these things while touching on things that we know about ourselves, real feelings that we have. So again, if you can see them in the micro instances, it gives you a much better chance of seeing them in the macro instances where these things are really important. And from the Geekbus, those are my best shot at words of wisdom for today. What can I tell you?